They told me I wasn't strong enough. They told me girls from poor towns don't become doctors. They laughed at me when I said I wanted to wear the white coat. But today, I am Dr. Sarah Thompson, and I want to share with you the truth of how I came from nothing, how I struggled, how I cried, and how I fought to reach where I am now. My story is not perfect. It is painful. But maybe it will give you hope when you feel like giving up. I was born in a small American town where everyone knew everyone. My father left when I was just 4 years old, and my mother had to raise me alone. We lived in a tiny house with a leaking roof. Sometimes when it rained, I would place pots under the ceiling to stop the water from soaking our floor. At night, I could hear my mother crying silently in the kitchen, but in the morning she would always smile at me and say, "Sarah, one day you will do something great. Don't give up." When I was little, other kids dreamed of becoming singers, actors, or rich entrepreneurs. I dreamed of becoming a doctor. Not because I wanted to be famous, but because my mother always got sick and we never had money for proper treatment. I wanted to help people like her, people who were forgotten, people who couldn't afford hospital bills. But dreaming is easy. Reality was not. At school, I was often teased. My clothes were old, my shoes had holes, and I carried secondhand books. Some kids said, "You'll never be anything, Sarah. You're too poor." I smiled outside, but inside, I cried. Every time someone doubted me, I wrote a small note to myself, "Prove them wrong." Those 3 words became my silent prayer. When I was 16, life became harder. My mother lost her job at the grocery store, and suddenly I had to take responsibility. After school, I worked as a waitress at a local diner. I cleaned tables, carried trays, and stood on my feet for hours just to earn enough for food and electricity. Some nights I was so tired that I slept with my uniform still on, books unopened. But the dream of becoming a doctor burned inside me like fire. College was my next mountain. We had no money for tuition, scholarships were rare, and competition was brutal. I applied everywhere, and most letters came back saying, "We are sorry." I almost gave up, but one letter changed everything. A state university gave me a partial scholarship. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was enough to keep my dream alive. I cried that day, not because I was accepted, but because I knew the real fight was just beginning. At college, I was nobody, just a poor girl among smart, rich students. While they drove cars, I took long bus rides. While they went on vacations, I worked double shifts at a coffee shop and sometimes cleaned offices at night. I barely slept, but every morning I told myself, "Sarah, one step closer." I lived on instant noodles and black coffee. There were days I had no money to buy textbooks, so I borrowed them or studied in the library until midnight. The pressure was crushing. Sometimes professors doubted me. Sometimes patients in training hospitals looked at me like I didn't belong. Once, during my second year, I failed an important exam. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I can't do this. But then I remembered my mother's face, her words, her sacrifices. I wiped my tears, stood up, and said to myself, "Doctors don't quit, and neither will I." By my 3rd year, I began to see changes. My grades improved. My professors started noticing my dedication. I worked long nights in emergency rooms as a trainee, watching lives being saved, and sometimes watching lives slip away. Each experience made me stronger, but it also broke me. I saw pain, suffering, and death. I held the hand of a child as she took her last breath. That night, I almost decided to quit. But deep inside, I knew my purpose was to fight for people like her, to be there when hope was fading. There were still endless struggles: bills, sleepless nights, hunger, loneliness. Some days I thought my body would collapse, but every morning I reminded myself, never give up. The same words I had carried since childhood, the words that kept me alive. The day I received my white coat felt surreal. It was a simple jacket to some, but to me it was proof that the nights of hunger, the long shifts, and the endless studying had not been for nothing. I remember sliding the coat on and feeling its weight in a new way, not as a burden, but as a responsibility that I had chosen. My mother was there, her eyes full of tears and pride. She touched the fabric gently, as if blessing it. And in that moment, every sacrifice made sense. Residency hit me harder than anything before. The hours were brutal, and the faces I saw in emergency rooms and wards were sometimes unbearable. I held hands of strangers while their families prayed. I watched hope and sorrow pass through the same room in a single night. There were nights I walked home feeling hollow, asking myself if I had the strength to continue. But then I would see a mother smile because her child recovered, or a grateful patient would squeeze my hand and whisper a thank you, and I would remember why I had started. My mother's health, which had always been fragile, eventually required more attention. Even after I became a doctor, the worry never left me. There were hospital bills, medications, and the daily weight of guilt that comes with wanting to give everything, but knowing you can only do so much. I visited her between shifts, carrying snacks she liked and stories from the hospital that I tried to put into simple words to keep her spirits up. She would smile and say, "You are doing what you promised." Her words were a salve for my soul. I learned that being a doctor is not only about medicine, it is about listening, bearing witness, and making small choices that matter. I learned to explain complicated diagnoses in calm voices, to hold space for grief, and to sit in silence when words are not enough. I became the kind of doctor who stayed a few extra minutes with frightened patients, the kind who learned the value of a gentle touch. In those small acts, I found meaning. As my career progressed, I had opportunities many girls from my town never get to see. I completed my specialty training and began to work in different hospitals, each with new lessons and new challenges. I made mistakes too, medical errors that haunted me in quiet moments, but those mistakes taught me humility and the need for continual learning. I took additional courses, sought mentors, and spent weekends reading journals to keep my skills sharp. Then came the decision that changed the direction of my work. I wanted to build a place where the poor could receive care without fear of being judged for their clothes, their past, or their ability to pay. I remember the first time I walked into the small clinic we rented for a sliding fee model. Peeling paint, a broken fan, but enough space for hope. We started with a volunteer nurse, an old folding table, and secondhand chairs. Word spread slowly. People came with skeptical eyes and heavy hearts. I greeted them, introduced myself simply as a doctor who remembers where she came from. And I listened. The clinic grew. We added a community outreach program that offered free health education in local schools and shelters. We partnered with a nearby pharmacy to provide discounted medicines for families in need. I used part of my earnings to fund vaccinations for children who otherwise would miss them. It wasn't glamorous. There were nights of paperwork and fundraising calls that left me exhausted. But when a mother came in with a sick child and left holding a healthy, smiling baby, the exhaustion melted away. There were challenges beyond medicine, bureaucracy, funding shortages, and sometimes the skepticism of other professionals who asked why I would spend my time on charity when I could be pursuing a more lucrative career. To them, I simply said, "My purpose is not measured in wealth. It is measured in lives touched." I hired local staff, trained community health workers, and tried to create a space where dignity was a part of every visit. As the years passed, I found a balance between clinical work and community leadership. I occasionally lectured at medical schools about empathy and the social determinants of health. I mentored young women who thought medicine was out of reach. I spoke honestly about late nights, financial struggle, and the emotional toll of patient care. Many of them told me those stories gave them courage to try. My mother's last years were peaceful, filled with small joys. Visits from former patients, homemade meals, and the quiet comfort of family. Holding her hand as she slipped away was the hardest thing I have lived through. But her final smile, so proud and relieved, was also my greatest reward. I had kept my promise to her. I had given her a life where worry was less constant. Looking back, I can trace the thread that stitched my life together. A promise, a stubborn refusal to be defined by circumstances, and the willingness to keep moving forward even when the road was dark. I did not become a doctor for prestige. I became one because I wanted to carry light into rooms where there was fear. The white coat, for me, is a symbol of that promise. If you are listening to this story now and feel small because life feels heavy, hear me. Your beginning is not your ending. You can build bridges from the places that once broke you. Start with small acts. Study a little longer, show kindness, ask for help, give help when you can. The world needs your courage, whatever form it takes. If this story touched you and you want to hear more real-life journeys of struggle and hope, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for listening to my story.